I chose this bandsaw over the other 17 inches because of the variable speed feature. And it has a separate stage for cutting metals and plastics and such, which run the blade at a lower speed. 17 inches is the throat. Technically, it's the diameter of the wheel, which is true for all bandsaws, whether it's 14, 17, 18, 21. It's always the diameter of the wheel. This will cover will cut just over 12 inches. This will take up to a 1-inch wide blade. I have a 3/4 inch blade on it right now. Typically I run a 3/8 blade with 3 teeth per inch. This is also 3 teeth per inch. If I were to upgrade, I would look at getting one of the newer variable tooth blades that have what they call a 2/3 or 2/4, which is like it has 3 teeth that are at 3 teeth per inch, and then 3 teeth that are at 2 teeth per inch, and it goes back and forth. Everybody praises them as a real improvement in keeping the gullet clear, especially with resawing. There's a lot of dust made, a lot of chips made from resawing, and the bigger and deeper the gullet, the better it'll clear out and not start feeding it back around to the top wheel and coming down on your work. The guides I'm very happy with, for whether you're cutting an 1/8 inch blade, a 1/4 inch blade, 3/8, all the way up to 1 inch. You slide the entire mechanism up here's your rear. This is the bearing up here that rides on the rear of the blade, or just barely makes contact, and then again under pressure it will load up and start to rotate. And so we bring it forward, so we're just behind where the tooth offset, the kerf starts to begin. And then independently you can rotate this lock right here. You can move just the upper bearing by itself, which accommodates the depth of blade. And then the guides are on a cam. But unloaded, the blade should not make contact with any guides. Under load, however, slowly rotating it until it just starts to rotate by contact with the blade. And there you can see it starting to rotate. Back it off just the tiniest bit so that it is no longer, the bearing will sit idle when the blade is not under load. And the settings on the bottom are complicated to film.
Yeah.
They are they operate the same way. First thing is on the manual, this thing comes, ships assembled, except for the table is not put on. Like most bandsaw tables, it's held on by 4 bolts that bolted to the trunnion set. The holes are bigger than the bolt, and so it can be misplaced by 1 degree or 2 degrees, and at least in this brand. Other brands it might be sloppier. By any means, the instruction manual just says put it on there and tighten it up. Which I found out isn't good enough for resawing. So what we're going to do, the first step is to get the miter slot aligned with the blade, parallel to the blade. So what we have here is a piece of poplar that's been cut down to snugly fit into the trough. And then this stick here, which has a little notch cut in it, so that's where the teeth are. So it isn't affected by the teeth. This is the 3/4, and you can, you want to make sure that it is free, and you can see it oscillating here, so that the mean of the oscillation is square.
It's just above the
You
table.
can clamp it against the table and then just raise a little bit with your.
Sure.
But if it was down tight, I guess once it stabilizes, I could put it down tight. But I like to have it free so you can see if it's staying square. Just barely off the table. And I loosened it for this demonstration. See, it has about maybe a degree and a half, which might not seem like much, but it is. So we want to get the miter guide, square with the blade. So right at the center, lined up with the blade, we set the distance on a square or a block of wood if you want to make something, but most everybody has a square. And then we come out here and we see that it's not parallel, yes, to the miter. Okay, this is actually as far as it will go. If I were going to really worry about it that much, I would take the table off and ream out the 4 holes or drill them slightly bigger so that there was more play, because it's up tight against it and it could still stand to be maybe a 64th of an inch over that distance. Now, fortunately, the kerf is thick enough so that it's not going to rub the blade body even with this little error. So now that we've gotten this rotated, go ahead and tighten down the table. It won't change, and more importantly, even if it does, because of the trunnion somehow being misaligned by the manufacturer, when it comes back to 0, and all resawing is going to happen at 0. When it comes back to 0, the trunnion will have been restored to its original setting. Well, I'm thinking of it, I guess, as a caution. I know it's common to move the table saw around on its mobile base if you have one by holding the table and pulling and pushing it. You really shouldn't. You should grab it by something that is permanently structural, like the body of the saw. Remember, this is a one-time setup for the life of your bandsaw, and so it's worth the maybe 2 hours of tedium of getting it done right. Okay. So the next thing we want to do is make sure that this fence, which is also somewhat adjustable by these 4 bolts you see right in here, it, like the table, has about a 1 degree movement you can put to it.
You're not going to saw it over there, you're just going to align it to the table saw.
Right, just, I could use a board, I guess, but it's easiest to align by bringing it over and tightening. And I did not intentionally misalign this, I don't have to realign it now, but if it is not flush with the slot, you loosen whatever. It's going to vary to make different manufacturers, but for this fence, you loosen these 4 bolts, rotate it to where it is parallel to the slot. So whether you're resawing or just doing bandsaw on 3/4 inch material or something, it's nice to be able to know that you're running it square to the blade, so the blade isn't trying to track left or track right. So the final thing, now that we have the table rotated so it's lined up with the blade, the fence adjusted so it's lined up with the trough, the final thing is to make sure that we get our RESAW fence face parallel to the blade, vertically. And there's, I guess an upgrade might address this sloppiness that happens when it's like an old cheap table saw fence. When you tighten it down, you are getting 3-point tightening, so it repeats square. It does have a nice magnifying lens here, so you can read it magnifies by maybe twofold, so you can read, and it's very useful both for regular sawing and you're using your miter slot, but especially for resawing so you can cut off consistent slabs.
Wouldn't step one there to make sure the table is square to the blade and isn't there a stop to adjust for that?
I'm sorry, I already had that adjusted.
Yeah.
But yeah, if when you unlock and then
Right.
and since it's already set, I know just bring it back to where it's back firm. I have a 5-inch piece of poplar here that had been planed, it's parallel, it's flat. And what I'm going to do is, it's kind of like when you're setting up a radial arm saw to make sure that it's truly square, you do it like a double error feature. So I'm going to first of all, bring the blade in, or the board in from the rear, up against the blade. See the marks on here. Down here the line is visible. Up here, not so much. Could use a tiny bit of adjustment, in which case we go down here and loosen the 0 setting so the table comes down a little bit or goes up a little bit. I didn't really pay attention to which way it's off. The table should go up maybe a quarter turn of the nut. But just to get on with it here, let's go ahead and resaw a piece of cherry. It's about 8 inches wide, and it has a very steep, very pretty piece of wood, but not much use for cabinetry or anything. But I'm sure it'll make nice, particularly like for book matched cut. I can opt to either cut a thin slice off, but you really should redress the face after you slice it off with a thickness planer or something. Otherwise, you have two faces of a thin veneer that are rough, and it's kind of hard to get it stabilized. What I'm going to do here is just cut it more or less down the middle. This is just eyeball down the middle, and I'll go ahead and put a mark on it so we can see, we can detect drift as I cut. So there's the finished item with a nice crotch piece. We could have it look a little better, I guess, but I'm real happy with how it has cut parallel. It didn't stray from the line more than I could detect. So I think it's worth the effort to go ahead and get your bandsaw set up. Like I say, it's a couple hours investment, but then it's not something each time you encounter it, you're wishing you had done it, and at some point you have to do it. Put it that way. There's a 150-pound rated one, so, and this is a significant cast iron piece here, so you get a lot of friction. And you want to set it, ideally, the very edge of the nose should be right at the front of the teeth. I had it rounded over, and then I went ahead and sawed it just to make sure I was cutting so I could clamp against it. And the caution on this, if you're cutting thin pieces, is you have to, there's some eye-hand coordination required to hold the board in tight while your other hand is maneuvering to keep it on track. And I find it, if I put this edge slightly in front of the blade so that my block of wood is encountering this first, and then the teeth, it makes it easier to get my setup. If I'm back here at the teeth, if I'm slightly off, I've already engaged the wood. And so if I put it out front just pretty much just ahead of the teeth, and it's quite stable. Okay, so I'm going to attempt to cut that using this nose piece jig. End of the work where I'm not cooking that.
Yes. Looks good. Yeah.
This piece here, well, either piece could be sandable, right? But
Yeah.
and you can keep within a 32nd or a 64th of an inch on.
Now one thing you didn't do there is a feather board here to keep pressure there.
Right.
Because if you don't have pressure there, then you're going to get it's very, on a longer piece especially, a bobble in the cut is almost inevitable.
Yeah, and you could hear it chatter when I first began to enter.
Yeah.
Probably what it's due to. And I do have a third, a 75-pound version of one of these that I could make a little. It only really has to come in like an inch up or something on the bottom. It doesn't have to come all the way up. I'm gonna do something like a cam lobe and just rotate it to where it keeps it in tight and then lock it down.
That's a terrific saw, Barry.
Yeah, I like it a lot.